Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for our Q3 seminar on how to recruit, hire, and retain high caliber employees during this difficult season that we are in. We continue to get questions on how to retain great employees. You find a great employee, and we're seeing that the millennials in that younger generations, they like change and they are always looking for something different. And so they have no problem changing jobs on a regular basis. And so I'm thrilled to have Amanda Flynn with Ironwood Business Consulting here today to present on this topic. A few housekeeping items. If you haven't already, if you would kindly mute your computer just so there's no background noise. And I am thrilled to offer a different platform that Amanda is going to be presenting on today. It's Mentimeter, and if none of you have used it before, if you will go to www.menti.com, you'll see it at the top of the screen. And that will then ask for a code. And our code for this presentation is 24357452. And again, that's at the top of the screen, www.menti.com, code 24357452. And then this will just allow you, throughout the presentation, Amanda has different things for you to participate in, and we'll have immediate results for everyone to see. I do encourage you to send those questions via the chat box like you normally do. If you participate in our Clear Up the Chaos, I will facilitate those questions back to Amanda throughout the presentation for her to speak to. So again, thank you for joining us. I know your time is very valuable, and I'm going to turn it over to Amanda for her to begin the presentation. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm so excited to be here today, so I thank you guys for your time. As Elizabeth mentioned, this is such a relevant topic now, but what's great about this is not only is it dynamic and always changing, but it's one of those things that you're constantly reevaluating and working through. We've heard a lot about it in the news lately, especially in relation to COVID. And then as Elizabeth mentioned, generationally, it comes up a lot, but it seems like no matter what business you're in, even the best of companies on some front faces some challenges. Since it is such a broad topic, going for introducing a lot of different ideas to you. So you'll see as we're working through each of the three sections, the recruit, the hire, and the retain, we'll be giving you different things to think about and see what might apply to your business, because one thing that works for one company may not work for everyone else. I know we've got varied backgrounds and experiences. So I hope that this is going to be helpful and gives you some ideas and a little bit more insight into some of the areas that we see evolving throughout the industry. So with that, we're going to do a practice here, initial start on the Menti. So our first topic is just asking you, and for all of us to have a little bit of practice, which area today interested you the most? And so as Elizabeth mentioned, you have to go to the Menti website and enter in our code. All right, yay! So I'll give you guys just a minute. I want everyone to be able to navigate to the site and try practicing. So we'll move maybe a little bit quicker through the question portions as we're going throughout the presentation, but give you guys just a few more seconds. Great. So it looks like pretty evenly spread, higher interest in recruiting and retaining. I'm going to go ahead and close this. So we start, oh, no, wait, recruiting, making a comeback. I'm going to go ahead and close it now. So recruiting has our highest interest right now, but with the all areas, it makes it a little bit more equal, but pretty good distribution between you guys. Looks like we've got this down. So thank you guys for bearing with us and getting started with that. As I mentioned before, the recruit, hire, retain is such a broad topic that when our HR team was researching and brainstorming which ideas to present to you guys, there were like 200. There's so many different strategies you can go with. So what I really tried to do to keep us on track and on time is lump those into some commonalities that we'll see throughout the recruiting portion, the hiring portion, the retain portion. And in looking at the topics we're going to touch on, it really rounds out to looking at compensation, looking at your candidate, and later you'll see candidate to employee experience, your overall company branding, and then finally team dynamics. A lot of times you will normally see team dynamics with company branding, but we really wanted to spend a little bit of extra time on that, which is why we separated that out. There's a lot within branding and dynamics. So if you're used to those being lumped together, that's why we've got those spread out. But you'll see I'll be circling back to these 4 main themes as we work throughout the presentation itself. So starting at the beginning, to get those hires, we're going to start within the recruiting sphere. And so our first main area, first theme, would be talking about the compensation portion of that. So one of the really key things that I would encourage you to look at, especially if you haven't looked at it in a while, and maybe you never have, if you've been recently growing in the last year or so, or just have not been able to set anything up formally in the past, it's a really good idea to look at your salary ranges as a whole. Obviously, so many candidates, when they are very first searching for jobs or talking to you, it may not be the very first question out of their mouth, but a lot of times it's what they're thinking is, what is the package? What's the bottom line? What are we going to get paid? So wanting to have established salary ranges within your organization. So whether that's an overall structure for a small company or bands, and progressions that you're working through, there's lots of different strategies that you can apply to the size and to your industry and department. It's important with that to be able to fairly and accurately do that, not only for your current team, but for your recruits, and to make sure that you're keeping your compliance and equality angles on track, that you do a thorough job analysis for the role that you're recruiting for. You want to make sure that you're making tweaks, whether it be on education or on experience, but that the range that you are looking at is really applicable to what you're asking for, which sounds obvious, I know, to all of us, but sometimes some of those little unicorn features we want from people could really bump up that price point a little bit. But keeping that in mind with the greater scheme of your organization salary ranges is important too. Of course, you're going to want to continue to stay competitive with the market overall. And with that, you could go through this whole process and build salary bandings or scales or performance management systems that tie into this. And it could be a large process and time consuming. And then you're done and you check it off your list and you move on. What's challenging with that, as we all know, is the market is constantly evolving. And so you really have to be mindful that you are remaining competitive out there, especially in situations like where we are right now with the job environment being so dynamic in COVID, that that you are up to date and offering the things that your top recruits are really going to be looking for. So when it's time to fill that next role, that's a good time to go ahead and do a quick reanalysis of that, especially if you have a lot of different roles, and it would be a huge undertaking to do the whole company at once. It's a good benchmark as you're filling that role. So making sure you thoroughly understand what the job is and that you've able to price it compared to the market. The last piece of that you really want to think about is how you would present that information within your ad and in your initial conversations with your candidates. As I mentioned before, and we all know, a lot of times it's top of mind. There are a couple of different ways at looking at whether you include the actual range in the posting or not. And some of that might come down to your individual preferences. On one hand, one advantage of listing it in your description at the beginning is you are saving your time if you're going to do a lot of phone screens, especially if you tend to get people applying that seem to be under or overqualified, and then you've gone through and but you've spent a lot of time going through phone screens just to have someone say after 15 or 20 minutes, oh, that's completely out of my range. On one hand, you may lose some people by the $ alone, especially if you have other fringe benefits that we'll talk about a little bit more here as we move into the package and the benefits. So, salary is not everything. And a lot of times you can be a bit more unique in your offerings if just either your overall budget or this specific role doesn't warrant a larger bottom line salary, or if it's something that maybe you're having some difficulty right now in the market, since it's tough to find different talent that you want to really enhance and sweeten the pot. So one way to do that is to be really creative in your offerings. And that could be very company specific, so far as, maybe that's offering more flexibility. Right now, we talk a lot about, the flexibility in scheduling or working from home and working with parents and around health situations. That's a really obvious thing right now, but it could be even things as little as dress code that might cost you nothing, but might mean a lot to an employee. So getting some feedback from your actual organization, informally or formally, about things that they like and enjoy is a good idea, especially if you're really trying to ramp up that creative offering. And looking at your time away from work, so whether that be your PTO or your sick time, making sure that that's not only comparable, but it's competitive. And again, that could also tie in some of that flexibility, that scheduling, seeing what that role could really allow and being open to that with your new hires and across your organization. And then again, the same way that you want to check your analysis and your market rate every time you're posting something, just really keeping in mind that the market is so dynamic that you're going to want to review that benefit package, that overall salary, those little perks along the way pretty regularly. So whether that's as you post or it's yearly, you'll want to stay tapped in, stay within your communities and talk to people and competitors and find out what it is people are looking for, but not just check it off your list and then move on and say, well, we did that. And then 5 years pass it. And unfortunately, then you're losing out on the candidates that you want. So our next question that we are going to talk about, since we're here in the recruiting portion, is I am just curious from you guys how you actually found your last role. Did you go to a job board? Did somebody refer you through word of mouth? So if you'll just take a few minutes or a few seconds here. And if it wasn't exactly one of these, if you'll choose the answer that was closest to it, that'd be great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll now. So it looks like just about half of us, pretty evenly between mainstream job boards and referrals, which I think is pretty in line with what we see. A lot of people really defer to the most widely known things, whether that be Indeed or LinkedIn. So that's pretty common. But then the more direct route, always is getting that inside ed and that introduction, or that, resume pass from a friend or a referral. So that's great. And then of course, recruiting sometimes comes in. I like the classified ads. I put that in there a little tongue in cheek because I feel like That's how I learned how to look for a job, at the early part of my career. And so I thought that was fun, especially if we have some tenured employees. So thank you guys for your participation in that. So still within that recruiting and compensation piece, I touched on it a little bit, but just being really timely. So right now in the COVID era, I'm a little sad, when I started researching for this presentation, I had this titled as post-COVID era, optimistically thinking that, but the lessons are the same, that we need to try to be more flexible, especially if we're limited in some of the other aspects of compensation, as far as what we're able to offer people, that flexibility, that hybrid scheduling, those sorts of things that, really speak to potential candidates and things that they have gotten used to over the last 18 months or could continue to get used to. So whether that's a remote hybrid, either a fully remote position, or a lot of organizations came back in some sort of hybrid environment, whether that be 2 or 3 days a week, but things that you could consider and offer without interfering with your business strategy. The other piece of that too that came, more heavily prevalent during COVID, top of mind was all of our technology needs. So even if it's something as little as offering internet reimbursement, or maybe it's a step up in their conferencing materials if they're going to be video conferencing a lot, having those little things that can make life easier that you're offering and doing for your candidates, it is really something you can advertise on the front end to them. You'll also, moving from compensation, really want to think about the experience your candidate is going through. So starting with that job posting that you put either in a recruiter's hands or on a job board, you want to make sure that the language that you are using is readable, it's straightforward, and in the way that it's not so heavily industry specific that it's reading Greek to some people. Of course, you'll want obviously some things that are specific, so that it's an interested candidate. But you want it to be easy to read. They are looking through those job boards and clicking on through, and so you want them to get the gist for it pretty quickly. You also want to have a lot of information that really is highlighting what you guys are offering and able to offer and what you hope this role will achieve. So being straightforward, but having information. But the last point here of differing from the job description, I would really encourage you guys to think about, if you don't already. The majority of the time, people, when they go to a job board or a posting, they just end up posting the straight cut and pasted job description. And of course, sometimes that's all time allows, and you have to just move on. And I certainly understand that. I have done it before too. But keeping in mind that there are hundreds and thousands of jobs out there, and that good candidates are hard to come by, really focusing in and targeting what you post in the way that your posting reads is important. If you've got either a marketing department, or if you've got some mentor or people that work with that in the organization, it might be something to chat with them about getting your readers' attention and making sure you're focusing on the most important things in the posting itself. And second most important within that the candidate will experience from your end is really making sure that you have an organized and intentional search. And what I mean by that is, we are all busy. Please don't think for a second I am putting down that we all have a million things to do. But unfortunately, if we don't approach recruiting with the right strategies, we're going to end up in the same boat pretty quickly. And none of us want to repeat the cycle in 30 days or multiple times a year. So making sure that you're really ready when you hit send on the posting for that, and that you have the time set aside to be able to interact with those candidates in a timely manner. Like we all know, they're going to get snatched up quickly, your top candidates. So you want to really be ready and let this be a focus for you. And in doing that, you'll want to make sure that not just you are ready, but anybody that's going to participate in the hiring process. So if you've got a team coming to interview, whether it be hiring managers, keep things like vacations and scheduling in mind. Of course, you've got to keep moving forward, but keep that in your game plan front of mind. There are a lot of pieces within either the posting itself or through either your HRIS systems or however you eventually onboard people or have people apply or post that can be automated. So really taking advantage of those tools. There's so many plugins and extensions now that could make that experience easier for the candidate, even if it's something as simple as having a clickable, fillable application versus handwriting it, scanning it back in, which is just what a lot of us have because it's what we've always had. And so taking advantage of that tech and automating what you can to make that easy and seamless so they don't turn away from the posting and maybe not apply because they don't want to fill something out. So only including the necessary steps with that too. If you don't need their whole entire full employment history, full resume on the front end, then don't ask for that. Only ask for what you're really going to focus on. You can get that information from your top candidates later if you need to. And then the last piece of the candidate experience is just really staying in communication with those that you're working with. And I know, again, this may seem obvious to all of us, but it's so hard to get lost in the sea of resumes. And then equally for your company to get lost if that candidate is really actively looking for things. So on the front end, talking to them about here's what our process looks like, here's what our timelines are expected to be, and then staying in touch with them. And those can be quick emails through a lot of the job boards. You can utilize their messaging systems if that's quicker, but taking that 20 seconds to cut and paste, hey, there's been a delay. Thank you so much for applying, but we've gone in another direction, which I think, again, most of us intend to do, but so often just seems to be the step that skips and people never hear back about a job. So if you do communicate the process and timelines, just making sure that you are either meeting those, or if something does come up, just being honest and forthright with the candidates so that they can consider their times and where they're at in their search as well. So one of the things we're going to look at here on the next slide is about mission, vision, and value statements. So if you guys have written those within your organization before, and you may not have, if there are any words or phrases that were really important to you, I'd love for you guys to share those. We'll give you just a second to have you share those. If you don't have a mission, vision, or a value statement, this might be a great idea. Ooh, love this. To start thinking about adding either one at a time or on a whole. So integrity, servant leadership, solution-oriented, childcare, that's great. That's a great offering. I love it. Forward thinking. Okay, we'll just give you guys a few more seconds and we'll close this up. Manifesting. This is great. Professionalism, balance, passion. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this one up. But thank you guys for sharing that. That can help give us all some ideas of some things we might want to keep in mind as we are either developing or reevaluating our own mission, vision, and values. And within that is that branding opportunity on the front end within the candidate experience, really making it known through each piece of the process, whether that be from the posting to the actual conversations to the onboarding. What sets you apart? What sets your company apart? What sets this role in this department apart? But what makes this unique and special? Why do they want to work for you? And within that, you can encourage you to advertise what you guys are really great at. Brag on yourself. It needs to be sincere. It needs to be factual data, but not forgetting to really let them know and give yourself a pat on the back for the things that you're doing great. If you're a very mission-driven organization, you want to let them know that. Or if you are growing quickly and your vision has a really developed 1 to 3 year plan, sharing those things with your candidates so that they know what the organization is not only like now, but what it's going to look like in the future. And then that value piece is great too, because especially if it's a very unique culture within the organization, people want to know what you stand for. So that's a great thing to add. Also within that branding opportunity is paying attention to generational strategies when you are talking with candidates. And so within that, obviously your offerings are going to be equal. You're not going to be offering one generation based on age alone. Of course, nobody's running into any discrimination issues there. But fine-tuning that message on how you are approaching that. So whether you're really advertising that flexibility and schedule to somebody younger, or whether you are gearing up and talking more about your 401k or your 403b to different individuals, or maybe people that are further in their career. Keeping those sorts of things in mind when you're talking to the specific candidate. You're not changing your offerings necessarily, you're just marketing what you offer a little bit better. And then of course, within that, a great place to get feedback is from your current team. Just same way that I'm asking you guys questions is finding out from people, sometimes the answer that they give you once they are within the organization and comfortable about why they took the job and what really appealed to them might be a little bit more honest than what they may have said in the beginning interview process, or it might have changed. And so take advantage of your employees and your team that know your company best. And the big last thing within the branding opportunity is highlighting your social responsibility, especially if that is a really strong piece of your mission, vision, and values. That can really speak especially to younger generations and people that are more in touch with that. People expect companies to be more responsible than we did in years past. So advertising that, defining things that you feel passionately and strongly about. And again, if it's a process and a plan, and maybe you're not quite there yet, but you know what you want the company to look like, sharing that vision of what you're hoping to achieve. And that could be everything from a recycling program, to changing how you do your major operations to be more environmentally friendly. Try to think outside of the box there. Like I said, it could be as small as something as recycling or reusing materials in a different way. So when you guys are trying to recruit and fill new roles, what is typically most important to your hiring team? And I had to narrow it down. So we've got a few choices here. If you guys will go ahead and pick the one that is closest to what you typically see. Let's see, most experienced that I expected. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this up in time. But we ended up with finding someone, reopened on accident, finding someone the team likes is our highest, most experienced, start date, personality. So a little bit of a mix, but it looks like experience and team fit is the highest for you guys. That's great. Next, within the recruiting, as I mentioned at the beginning, within branding is that dynamics piece as well. So not just the company overall, but really specifically thinking about this team, this role, this site, what that's going to look like. A lot of times you hear, or you are looking for someone that fits on your team. I would challenge and encourage you to stay thinking about next steps, and it not just be someone that is exactly a mirror image of what your team is now, but someone that is going to not only fit within your team, but add to that team. You want to elevate, you want to expand, you want to grow and strengthen as a team. And sometimes that might be choosing a little bit different personality style or a little bit outside the box. But if you know it's going to really stretch your team members and demand more from them and work better. That's something to consider. But really also just knowing what you need. You know, if you need someone with 10 years of experience, going into that and being committed to that range versus just needing the first person that applies and just taking whatever it is, whether it's outside of your salary range or not enough experience. And within that, as I mentioned, site and departmental considerations. So things within that is just, you know, what is the pace of the environment? There are some environments that have a long ramp up. There are some that expect you to already know what's happening and jump right in. And that may even change within departments based on the managers or the role specific. So having that information beforehand is helpful. And even what the general learning style of the, not only the recruit, but also of the other team members, that can help with that fit to add portion. Because a great candidate that isn't going to learn through the way you teach may not eventually work out long term. And last with this, I would just remind you to expect an interview to be a two-way street now. Candidates are asking and demanding a lot more. And so expect for them to ask questions, be prepared. Think about at the end of the interview how prepared those questions were and what value they asked. Did they just ask something because you said, do you have any questions? Or have they really thought and researched? But try to plan for that. So as we move into the hiring piece, again, we're going to circle back to these four main themes. So back to the compensation piece. So we had our goal and how we posted and recruited on the compensation end, but now we're ready to hire our top candidate. So just like we're going to expect the candidate to ask us questions in the interview, really anticipating that there could be a back and forth negotiation. Sometimes you do, in the interest of timeliness, just want to go with your very best offer from the beginning. But generally, you should expect that there would be some sort of negotiation, whether that be on the actual compensation structure, whether it be on the salary, maybe something like PTO, you've got some flexibility, or some of the other things we've talked about. But to expect that and have a plan in mind before you go in about what is acceptable and approved. Having those ranges, having that timeline, thinking of some creative things that could be offered. So that way you aren't caught in a spot and potentially lose a candidate while trying to come up with a counter offer. And you'll want to quantify other benefits, especially if you are worried about that actual salary number or just want to enhance it. And ways that you can do that is having a really solid benefit summary prepared that is ready for your candidates. This could be a variation of something you already provide to your employees, but maybe you make it a little bit more general. So this would just be a description of everything you offer, from medical insurance down to short-term disability or 401k, but a nice, good one-pager that you're able to give to people. Maybe it's not so specific with numbers, so you don't have to do a ton of updating year over year, if that tends to change a lot within your organization. But having that marketing type piece available when you are sending over the formal offer, so that you're reminding them everything that's included other than just the bottom line salary. Another way you can do that is with a full compensation statement. Again, easy thing to do if you do this yearly for your employees. If you haven't done these before, you may have received one. So it's generally a one-page letter from your organization that really quantifies and puts a visual in front of you of, sure, your salary is $50,000 a year, but the company is paying $15,000 a year for your insurance and benefits. We're spending this much in payroll taxes, really putting a number on that so that the candidate can try to keep the entire package top of mind. And then anything else that might really set you apart from the competition, you of course want to mention in those materials. Really focusing on and making sure your message is coming across that you are investing in this person. If somebody's got a lot of offers, they are going to want to be and feel like they are your top priority. So really speaking to them about their interests down the line, So whether that might be growth potential, their career trajectory, if you are doing any sort of succession planning or have a good training and support structure and plan within your organization, or it's something you're planning on working on, this might be the catalyst to get started with that. But communicating that, not just assuming that this potential hire knows what happens within your organization, which sometimes just happens to all of us because we think they'll ask. Well, if they've got 3 great offers, again, you want to be marketing yourself to make sure you secure that hire. So next question I'd love to find out from you guys is, overall, what does your timeline look like from onboarding to orientation? So from the time the candidate walks in the door till they are fully trained. And this is a little bit more detailed question. So if we don't get a ton of responses, that's okay. It might be tough to think about if it's not something you've analyzed. But we're going to talk about it here on the next slide. So I'll give you guys just a few seconds to see if anybody has any feedback. And if not, that's okay. Oh, here we go. Depends on the position, a few hours to a few days, a couple of years. Oh, that's great. Okay, and here, I'll go ahead and close that and we'll move to the next one. And the reason I was asking you guys to think about is now we're in the hire section. They're not just the candidate experience like we talked about with recruits. Now it's your employee. This is the person you want to hire. So you're thinking about this a little bit differently. Being timely with your interactions with them. So not just that follow-up, but making sure that you are aware of their timelines as well, so that you don't lose out on any potential candidates, especially if it's someone that is absolutely your top choice. Sometimes you might have some internal flexibility when you relay that information. Hey, this person has to make a decision this week. Could we possibly get, this last interview in? And if sometimes people are able to accommodate that, but being up to date and timely on both sides of the street, both on your timelines and on the candidates. And again, with that, giving them accurate information. Don't tell them that interviews are going to start next week if there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. Of course, in our ideal world, we'd all love to get through the full recruiting, hiring cycle, in 30 days or less, but be honest and upfront if it's going to look a little bit different from that. And have in mind the things that you get asked a lot from other candidates that are coming on board or maybe past offers, so that you have the answers to those questions top of mind. So you're on the phone making that verbal offer, are anticipating what they're going to ask versus having to say, oh, let me get with the hiring manager to ask that, and then I'll get back to you, and then losing a couple hours to a couple of days. The next big piece there within that candidate to employee transition is making sure that everyone understands their part within this process. It's rarely a one-person show in hiring. So whether that be the departmental manager, whether it be the person that posts it, whether that be the top finance person that's going to approve it on the back end, but having, even if it's not a fully drawn out, written out standard operating procedure, everyone understand, okay, for this job, this is who is going to have responsibilities, and this is what my responsibility is. And within that, communicating that to each other so everyone knows what we're working on and what timelines we're working with, and keeping on that schedule and keeping yourselves internally accountable, so that you don't lose out on hiring that top candidate. And then the same thing I would say too is to really think about what that onboarding experience is going to look like. This references back to when I was talking in the recruiting section about trying to have a really organized and intentional search. Again, I know it's so much easier said than done, but if an employee accepts a job and then it's just chaos, they can't get answers to questions, start dates move, they walk in on their first day and you're obviously not even faking that you're prepared for them, that is really setting that first impression that's going to be so hard to change. And their resume is still probably out there. They're probably still getting calls from other companies. We don't want to give them a reason to even entertain those calls. And one of the crazy statistics that I'm not going to make up the number because I am blanking on the exact number, but it's something ridiculously high in the 70 percentile. People admitted, being afraid to ask where the bathroom was on their first day and no one offering it up. Now, and honestly, I'm going to date myself a little bit. That's something I remember from early days about 10 years ago. I think people are a little less shy these days, but keeping some of those really basic things in mind when someone is onboarding, don't just assume that they know how your office works, that they know where the kitchen is, that they know where the bathroom is, and make time for that. Within your organization, that might only be a few hours to a few days setting aside before just throwing them into the fire. But having a plan for that, being prepared, so whether that being having their computer ready, their welcome up, it can be little things like printing a welcome sign. One of my previous roles, I never got over how many people, would take pictures and post it on their social media because no one had ever, had a great welcome for them. And it wasn't anything elaborate. It was just having little signs up around the office, having that swag ready for them on their desk, looking like you are ready for them, even if you are just faking it. So then going back to that branding opportunity and really trying to convey what you are and who you stand for, who you are and what you stand for. Within that, securing that offer, especially if you do have that really mission, vision driven organization, really focusing on highlighting why you do what you do and what they could grow and benefit from that. So the meaning, giving that why to those people. And that could be something that you're sharing as a company, and then also really digging in to understand what's important to them, because that's going to help you with understanding how to really secure them and finish the deal. You'll want to keep in mind, though, how you might compare to other people within your same sector. So especially if there is something that is especially unique and important to your organization or that you're really strong and proud of, making sure to highlight that so that it's just not assumed that company A is the same as company B, is the same as company C. So I'll just take the highest salary and move on. But really keeping in mind that marketing aspect, which I know I keep harking back to, even though we may not be marketing professionals, but really thinking of it that way, especially in a competitive market like right now. But also including that potentially new employee and how they would be a part of this as well, especially if you get the idea that this would really speak to them, to have a job that has meaning to them and value, really setting that stage and building that picture where how they are going to easily mesh into that. And again, as we mentioned with recruiting, we do want to keep different generational appeals in mind. So again, just really updating what you say and how you present it. So that might again be different. Maybe the candidate that is more analytical, that would really like a full compensation statement, spelling out what the benefits are including, that might be something very different from a more artistic environment that might appreciate more face-to-face time or more training or more as the meaningful pieces. Getting to know your candidate on that level so that you can speak to them and adjust that messaging. You'll also want to highlight what you've already accomplished, your intelligent and diverse workforce. So again, bragging on what you already have and sharing, your strengths, how you've built your team. So whether that's their education or experience level, all of the pieces that make the team that this person would be walking into unique and different. Again, setting you as a brand apart from everyone else so that there is no doubt why they want to come and work for you. And within that, again, tie them back in, see how they would add to this. Ask what they would think would be next and what could be built for the future. So within your organization, who is typically included in your hiring decisions? I'll give you guys just a few seconds. And this one, it will allow you to answer more than one, since a lot of times it's more than just one person's decision. Okay, so mostly, let me go ahead and close now. So our top one's the hiring manager and human resources. I think that's what we would expect, but also keeping in mind some of those other key players. So the last piece in the hiring portion, again, transitioning that candidate to employee, is that individual team dynamic. So not just the big company brand, but what does that local team look like? Can you pull them in on the interview versus just the hiring manager? Getting varied perspectives. If two different people sit in on the interview, they may hear entirely different things, or one person may pick up more on mannerisms than the others, but getting different input about who would be the top candidate. And also, if you don't, now this is a little tough with COVID right now, if you aren't doing on-site meetings, but making sure that the candidate has been to your office if that's where they're going to be every day. They want to know what the commute is going to look like. They want to know the feel of the building. So keeping that in mind if you're able to. And moving on from that onboarding piece, which is generally just that initial paperwork piece, into that full orientation. So thinking beyond just the day one, what is their actual training going to look like? But being realistic, no one, maybe not no one, but most roles you're not going to learn in a day. And even if you have a really robust organization and orientation process, just keeping in mind that they are not going to remember everything. Sometimes it's just information overload. So either gradually introducing that information or being mindful that you'll need to continue to train on that. And so with that, then tie in your engagement and your style. What's unique to the team and department? So don't just tell them, oh, this is a great and really outgoing team, if that's not what they're really like. So that's what I'm talking about, walking the walk. Make your promises be unique and specific to that team so that a candidate doesn't expect that and then be unhappy once they've joined, that it isn't that. So again, just making the time for each of these components, and then taking any lifestyle considerations that you can allow for, again, family, commute, anything like that. So our final phase here, now we've got our top candidates, how are we going to keep them? So again, compensation, huge piece of that. One of the big things you'll want to keep your eye on is gaps. A lot of times we'll reanalyze the position because we're doing our due diligence while recruiting, and we set a really competitive market salary, but maybe we have left our more tenured employees behind, so that there is this large gap between your newest employees versus your tenured employees. You want to be continually evaluating that, making sure that you're not only keeping up with the market, but standard of living, cost of living type raises, so that people aren't incentivized to jump organizations to get a raise that way. All that being said, you have to do something that fits with what's possible in your organization. If it's not going to make sense or be sustainable to offer high sticker value numbers, go back to that creative piece, because if you raise everyone's salaries but then end up having to cut in other areas, that's really going to affect your job satisfaction piece. So within that compensation structure too, if that salary is a number that maybe there's less flexibility in, again, looking back at your benefit package year over year, what could we maybe offer or tweak that could be a little bit more incentivizing for our employees? That's going to change. Our priorities have changed over the last few years. And as each generation moves on, the standard operating package of 10 years ago isn't going to match what people are necessarily looking for today. And some little things there that you can creatively be looking at, or even things like holidays, you know, whether that's the floating holiday or being more flexible with what days are celebrated. Location-based has come up a lot here with COVID, even if it's possible for them to work from another city or another place, or maybe it's not working from a different city all the time, but maybe you have the flexibility to allow and encourage your employees, oh, you need to go be near this family member right now. You can still work, but you want to be there at night. Okay, that's something we can offer. But being creative and being in touch with what your people are wanting and needing. And then, of course, raises and bonuses, making sure that you have an established structure there so that it's fair and balanced and we're eliminating those gaps. Making sure we're communicating that to all of our employees, not just having it in the handbook and then never mentioning it again, but also having a backup plan or alternatives in case something happens, the economy, the market, you know, something within the organization, and you aren't giving or able to do the raises and bonuses you expected. So I'm being a bit chatty, so we're just going to spend a second on this. But what do you think is the best way to retain employees? Give this just a few seconds, and then we'll move on to our next slide. Any ideas? Salary, making sure they feel heard, great. Appreciate them, show you care. I love all of this showing, because a lot of times it's not just telling, it's showing. Remembering that experience. So again, we kept in mind the potential hire experience, and then we transitioned them to a candidate when we were hiring them. But we don't want to just focus on the new people. You don't want to forget about the people that are there and have proved themselves day to day. Check in with them. That can look a lot of different ways. So whether that is doing internal polls or surveys, which, although less informal, might be more reasonable for you to be able to accomplish and put off, or something like stay interviews where your managers are really making intentional, prepared check-ins with your employees that have stayed. Don't wait till they leave to do the exit interview. Find out why they're staying. So that's a great idea that you could tie into, you know, other quarterly check-ins or performance reviews, but doing it throughout the year. And making sure that for your candidates, you consider, if you don't already, their individual development. Again, we made all these promises on the front end, wanting to make sure that we have things like succession plans in place, or we know what they're interested in, that they're challenged and have growth opportunities. Sometimes that's not always a manager role. Maybe that's adding levels within your organization, junior and senior people within a role. And just making sure they have what they need to do great work, that their needs are met to the extent possible, that you are open to feedback, and that they know how to get in touch with you, and that you have open doors and want to hear their feedback. That branding piece for keeping our employees, again, that we've touched on before, just evolving, not just having a plan and remaining stagnant, but thinking for the future, and also keeping in mind anything that could be happening economically and what that's going to look like, and communicating that to your employees. So if your strategies change, just reiterating to them what you are doing, how you appreciate them, why you're appreciating them, keeping those commitments to them. And other little ideas you could do there are, you know, having committees and task force, get your people involved. And thinking about your actual organization structure. A lot of times we set our org structure, again, check it off the list. We don't need to look at it, but you have a dynamic team. Maybe it's time to reevaluate that. Maybe you need some more team leads or managers. And setting that daily example. It's not just the promises on the front end, but whatever we are truly saying is important to us, being able to support that lifestyle. Not advertising we have all this PTO and never let anybody feel like they can actually take anything, but stay in touch with your team so that you are realistic, especially if you are the person having these conversations with your tenured employees. So then that last piece on team dynamics would be looking at your manager's role within that. So for your managers, challenging them to take the next step and become a leader, making sure the people that are managers are the right people, not just the people that have been there the longest. Sometimes they coincide, but not always. Making sure that their responsibilities are reasonable and that are going well. So within that is performance management. So how are issues handled? Are they handled, or are we just complaining about them? So within that, how, like I just mentioned, the org structure, you know, maybe one manager has too many direct reports or has too much on their plate. Allow them to succeed, especially if you see some struggle there. And then the last piece, you know, the all-inclusive, wonderfully defined engagement, that really getting in touch with your people about what is working, what's not working, and what's not being said. If you're asking these questions and getting eye rolls and not the feedback, really trying to dig into what they're not telling you. Okay, I know we sped up there at the end and we've only got just a few minutes left, but if there are any questions, I'd love to have those.
Thank you so much, Amanda. How often do you recommend a review with an employee?
Like a performance review?
Yes.
Okay, so generally, you would at least do the process formally once a year, but I am a big encourager of, you know, not just even doing that quarterly check-ins, but thinking about this like those stay interviews. This should be a constant ongoing process. So whether you can pull that off weekly or monthly or quarterly, as often as you reasonably can, but I'd probably try to do no less than once a quarter. Again, these can be quick check-ins, but main annual performance review at least annually.
What's the best way? We've had one submitted here on Mentimeter. What's the best way to screen applicants for the ability to learn quickly and retain a lot of information?
I think with that is making sure that you have some really on-point behavioral based questions within your initial interview. So maybe giving them scenarios that they wouldn't expect and seeing how they respond. Even if they don't give you the right answer, you want to encourage them to process out loud, talk you through how they got there, because a lot of times that can give you insight to how they would solve actual problems. The retaining a lot of information, again, might be a little tough on the front end, but with that, you can even do things like purposely giving them, maybe it's lots of information about the company, and then being able to circle back and, you know, ask a question, check for understanding to see if they were listening. Little tweaks like that within your presentation and within your interview to try to pick up on some of those mannerisms.
Great feedback. Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to submit? Friendly reminder, I want to remind everyone on the call, as a client of NCW and Sanford and Tatum, you do have access to Amanda and Ironwood Consulting at any point in time for guidance. So if you are in the process of hiring and have additional questions after this webinar, I do welcome you to either reach out to myself or reach out directly to Amanda. She has her information here on this slide for you to jot down. I will be sending a follow-up email with the presentation and the recording should you wish to share it internally with your team. I appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable, and I hope that you found today to be very informative, and I hope you'll have a great afternoon.
Thanks,
you, Amanda. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.